Pay close attention. The news you are about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Well, Katan, in the news tonight, talk about several stories, including one, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy meeting with Pope Francis and the Pope giving him a special message for President Biden. Also, we have a drone attack on the Kremlin, and President Putin there saying that they now reserve the right to retaliate when and where they see fit. And also, we see NATO now making moves with Japan to possibly get involved there. So those stories and many more. But first, is the United States heading into a true banking crisis? Well, investors have more reasons to be worried as two more banks experience uncertainty. Pacific Western and Western Alliance, two mid-sized banks, are in trouble and exploring what their options are.
Right. At the beginning of the week, First Republic was bought out by J.P. Morgan, and now Pacific Western and Western Alliance both seem to be headed in the same direction. Red flags went up yesterday when PacWest stocks fell by 50%. Well, 2023 has been a bad year for Pacific Western, losing a total of 85% of its value. That means millions of dollars have been lost by investors with no end in sight.
Well, such losses have forced it to see what can be done at this point. Now, the bank issued this statement, quote, "Recently, the company has been approached by several potential partners and investors. Discussions are ongoing. The company will continue to evaluate all options to maximize shareholders' value," unquote. So what that means essentially is that the bank is leaving all options on the table. They could A, of course, sell assets to raise money, B, bring in new investors, or even C, consider selling completely.
So why are the banks facing such tough times? Well, one major reason is the federal government continuing to raise loan and mortgage rates. Well, what does that have to do with the banks? It's simple. The banks hold many government bonds, so when the rates are increased, the value of the bond declines. As this week, yet another rate increase was announced. This is the 10th increase since March of 2022.
Well, but Fed Chairman Jerome Powell made this comment on the U.S. banking system, quote, let me comment briefly on recent developments in the banking sector. Conditions in that sector have broadly improved since early March, and the U.S. banking system is sound and resilient," unquote. But banks closing doesn't give the general public much confidence in the chairman's words. So not too sound and resilient if we're seeing these banks go under.
Yeah, especially in the time period when most of our transactions are done electronically. So it's not just like the old days when you can just bury your money, you know, in a hole in the backyard or stuff it under your mattress. Definitely rely on banks for many, many things for everyday use. Well, illegal immigration is a crisis of another kind taking place along the U.S. southern border. U.S. Homeland Security officials say Border Patrol is already overwhelmed. So when Title 42 ends on May 11th, things will become even harder. Please take a look at the situation for yourself.
We're switching channels now. Another difficult morning for agents along our southern border. For the fourth day in a row, a group of about 100 migrants crossed into San Diego from Tijuana illegally, with those numbers only expected to grow as Title 42 nears an end. KUSI's Dan Plant joining us now from the U.S.-Mexico border with more on this. May 11th, Dan, is coming quick.
Yeah, it is 9 days away, May 11th. Today is the 2nd, and that is when, well, some people say that things are going to get really, really crazy. By the way, right now, leading up to it, we're looking at 7,000 people every single day that are currently crossing into the U.S. illegally. That means not going through the proper channels. What they're expecting is that to double, probably up to about 13,000 a day. And boy, there's a lot of panic internally anyways. What are they going to do with all these folks? How are they going to deal with this? For a lot of people watching this video, it is hard to comprehend the size and the scope of the humanitarian crisis that is currently happening just a stone's throw away from America's finest city. This is the scene this morning along the San Diego-Tijuana border. More than 100 immigrants crossing into San Diego illegally, and this is the fourth day in a row we have seen such large numbers. Keep in mind, this is more than a week before Title 42 expires.
The United States Border Patrol is completely overwhelmed. San Diego, for example, I talked to a couple people this weekend. Every station was completely full, and they had hundreds, almost 1,000 people waiting out in the field that had already surrendered, waiting to come in to get processed.
Already outnumbered by the immigrants and the cartels, the Border Patrol is preparing for a tsunami when Title 42 expires in 9 days. The cartels now have social media websites. On those sites, they claim the U.S. border will be wide open on May 11th, and everyone is welcome. Come May 11th, we could be seeing more than 13,000 immigrants every single day.
It's hard to estimate the exact number, but it is going to definitely increase. I've been talking to some colleagues in Juarez. All the shelters over there on the south side of the border are completely full. Aliens are staging south of the border. They're still coming across in droves, but yet the backup is there. Same thing with Tijuana. Same thing with Matamoros.
Under the Biden administration, the attitude toward illegal immigration clearly took a turn from the Trump years. President Trump obviously concerned about enforcing the laws, but according to a former Border Patrol chief, Rodney Scott, President Biden and his Homeland Security Secretary are more concerned about processing the immigrants than they are about enforcing the laws.
I've never seen such a secretary that misleads America like this. Actions speak louder than words. As long as the illegal aliens cross the border and get released into the United States to roam freely, this will never stop. And that's what this administration put in place the day that they were inaugurated. The secretary talks in vague terms, but if you listen closely, he's always talking about expediting the flow of people into the United States. He never talks about border security, deterrence, or actually securing the border. And his entire process and strategy is focused on processing people and getting them away from the border so that the public doesn't see these big groups of people. That's going to get worse when Title 42 goes away.
And when the flood of immigrants is guided to the borders by the cartels, the dangerous game of cat and mouse begins. Occupy border agents with the immigrants so the drug cartels can bring in that poison in another part of the border wall.
When they overwhelm Border Patrol, it creates huge holes in border security. So every time we have a significant increase in illegal aliens entering the U.S., drug seizures and criminal arrests actually decrease. And it's not because those things went away. It's because they're masked. The agents can't respond to them. So fentanyl's getting into this country in a way we've never seen before, heroin, meth, and criminals as well.
Well, Katana, as we can see there, May 11th, going to be a pretty big day. People already lined up on the border waiting for that clearance to come into the United States. Well, Israel and Gaza terror factions have agreed to a ceasefire, as reported by the Palestinian side. Now, this came after a 24-hour bombardment of 104 rockets and mortars being fired into Israel. The agreement was negotiated by Qatar, Egypt, and the United Nations and went into effect at dawn. Yet still, a rocket alert went off in one town shortly after the ceasefire began. The Israeli Defense Force has since decided it is safe for Israelis to resume normal daily activities with no further security measures at this time.
Well, sirens from Gaza blew all night along the Israeli border after hearing of the death of Qadar Adnan, an Islamic jihadist who was arrested back at the beginning of February. At the time, he decided to go on a hunger strike that lasted 87 days. And since 2004, Adnan had been detained by Israeli forces 12 times, spending a total of 8 years in jail, during which he went on 5 hunger strikes. This time, however, Adnan was found unconscious in his Israeli cell and taken to a local hospital where he was pronounced dead. He is survived by 9 children.
News of Adnan's death ignited Palestinian anger, and mortars and rockets began to be fired over the border during the night. Now, in retaliation, the IDF carried out several rounds of airstrikes on Hamas targets, like a base believed to be a weapons production site, a concrete production plant, and a tunnel used by Hamas located in southern Gaza.
Well, continuing with the news from the Middle East, yesterday Iran seized a U.S.-bound oil tanker in international waters. Some believe the hijacking is a retaliation for the U.S. redirecting an Iranian oil tanker towards the U.S. The Iranian oil was originally headed towards China. What could this kind of behavior lead to?
Well, we're now going to turn to our field correspondent, Larry McGee, who has been covering several stories for us, including the most important one here, NATO moving into Japan. We know NATO has extended its reach recently and really has infuriated Russia because of their movements there along Russia's western border. And now this move is probably going to get China a little bit irate. So, Larry, what's the latest here on NATO moving into Japan?
Amid all of the hostility between Russia and NATO over European expansion, there is now talk of similar activities possibly beginning in Asia as the Papal-backed alliance opens a new office in Japan. The action has caused alarm in Beijing, who has publicly labeled the move as a security challenge. NATO itself has stated in response that it harbors no ambitions in either the Indo or Asia Pacific, but they have left the door open for future membership in the region. The prize for the nation showing the most visible interest in joining the organization goes to Tokyo, with its prime minister presently seeking to double the country's military budget for the thought that Asia could soon also see the kinds of incursions now being witnessed in Ukraine. For IPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Well, like you said, you know, that those moves by NATO are definitely heightening or putting on alert the Asian continent, and I'm sure Russia is also taking a look at what this is going to lead to. Well, Russia has said that there has been an assassination attempt on President Putin by two unmanned aerial vehicles, also known as UAVs, that were intersected over the Kremlin recently. Unverified video appears to show one of those drones shot down over the Kremlin. In a statement from Moscow, they said, quote, as a result of timely actions taken by the military and special services with the use of radar warfare systems, the vehicles were put out of action. We regard these actions as a planned terrorist attack, end quote.
Well, President Putin was not harmed in the alleged attack. Neither was anyone else. Now, Russia has said that it reserves the rights to take retaliatory measures when and where it sees fit. Now, Kiev has denied any responsibility in this attack.
Russia is also blaming the U.S. for instigating Ukraine to attack Moscow with those drones. In a statement by John Kirby, Washington has called the allegations a blatant lie. Russia's deputy foreign minister said, quote, Russia is on the verge of an open armed conflict on the United States, end quote.
Yeah, and these little things, they can pretty quickly turn into big things.
Oh, for sure.
You know, and that's many times what Yeshua Hawkins mentioned is something small, you know, could ignite an all-out war.
That's right.
Well, the Pope entertained a meeting with U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy recently, and while there, the Speaker expressed to the Pope President Biden's fondness for the Pope. Now, the two exchanged gifts and pleasantries. Upon leaving, McCarthy said to the Pope, quote, I will see the President Tuesday and I'll tell him that you have a plan for him, unquote. Now, the Pope asked McCarthy to pray for him. The Pope and President Biden met for the first time during his presidency in 2021.
Now, the big question that a lot of people have is what actually goes on behind those closed doors? What are being said in those secret meetings? And what is the plan that the Pope has for President Biden? We've seen many moves in the past, including the German wall falling down after Reagan met with the Pope. Not that long after that, and then that wall falls down. You know, so we're on the verge of a lot of different things in this time period. The nations are very heightened in anger and ready to strike at the drop of a hat. So I guess we'll see as time goes on what is in the storehouse.
Right, and not too many people would realize that the Pope there has so much influence on these leaders of these nations and countries and so forth that he could say, you know, here's the plan, you go ahead and carry it out.
And as it's been said many times, the Pope has no army of its own, but NATO is the Pope's army. Right. So we see those tentacles continue to spread out. Well, if you'd like to learn more about current prophecy and what to expect, contact the House of Yahweh. And when you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and the monthly newsletter. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites by going to yahweh.com, yeshuahawkins.com, or yahwehsbranch.com. You can also visit our website by going to ypnnews.com. If you'd like to email the House of Yahweh, you can do so by emailing info@yahweh.com. For any international calls, you can call the number that's on your screen now. And don't forget to visit the latest and greatest Bible study tool on the market today, the Yisrael Says program, by going to yisraelsays.com. And you can go to and look at the Ask Yisrael program. You can find that by going to askyisrael.com.
Well, don't go anywhere. Stay with us because there's another classic and exciting sermon from Yisrael Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Hammerman.
Thank you for watching.